Tonight, the president says he'll put Todd Blanche's nomination on ice until the Republican senators pushing back are gone. But one holdout warns that's not a safe bet.
Apparently he's getting some pushback from higher-ups at the White House.
Plus, throw the bums out. That's what a new CNN poll shows voters think about all of Congress. And with less than 100 days to go before the midterms, Democrats have the early edge. Also, $100,000. The administration wants to charge for hiring foreign students who graduate from American universities. But will the courts intervene? And the left insurgency.
There is 0% chance that whoever the elected Democrat is that wins the primary will be pro-Israel in any way, shape, or form.
One of the left's most polarizing voices has a prediction for 2028. Live at the table, Bakari Sellers, Jason Rantz, Jamel Hill, and Noah Rothman. Americans with different perspectives aren't talking to each other, but here they do. Good evening, I'm Abby Phillip in New York. Let's get right to what America's talking about. President Trump's gamble. Tonight, the president is apparently so unwilling to pull back from his tax immunity deal that he and his family stand to benefit from, and he refuses to give up this billion-dollar anti-weaponization fund for his allies, that now he's threatening to put his hand-picked nominee for attorney general on ice. Republican senators John Cornyn and Thom Tillis have signaled for days they're not going to support Todd Blanche unless the administration kills Trump's fund for good and ensures that Trump and his family are not exempt from future IRS audits. They want both demands in writing, and they're not backing down. Today, both senators met privately with Blanche, and we're hearing that they did make some progress, but there is still no deal. But Trump has a workaround. He says that he has no objection to temporarily withdrawing Blanche's name until Cornyn and Tillis are out of office. But Trump's threat is a risky bet, to say the least. Cornyn lost his primary after Trump endorsed his opponent. Tillis isn't running for re-election. And Cornyn has warned that POTUS is mistaken if he believes concerns about the provisions in his tax lawsuit settlement are limited to me and Senator Tillis. Here's Tillis's message to the president.
Hey, 158 days, they can try it again, roll the dice on what the Senate confirmation process looks like next year. It's all on him. But it's certainly within his authority to do that.
And before we open it up to the table here, we want to invite you at home to join our debate. Go to cnn.com/Abby, weigh in there. We'll get to some of your comments as we go through the show. Two big things here is the president being so unwilling to let this thing go that he doesn't mind not having a confirmed AG. But secondly, yeah, what a gamble, Noah, for him to say, oh, yeah, next year we'll just do it, even though we don't know what's going to happen with the Senate.
Yeah, if I was looking at the polling landscape right now and the Senate math, I wouldn't be overly confident that you're going to get more Republicans in the Senate or even hold the majority. It's very much up in the air. What Todd Blanche said that he would do orally is shelve the weaponization fund, even, which is not sufficient for senators. They want it in writing. Even in that in those comments, he refused to back away from the tax, liability pledge and the sweeping immunity for the Trump family. And that does seem to be what the president wants, because if he was to put it in writing, it would actually kill the weaponization fund. It's oral pledges from the acting AG don't matter. If the president's attorneys sign on to what is essentially the end of this settlement, that's it. That's done. Yeah. So they're not going to go that far.
That's exactly what he doesn't want. And to your point, I mean, the tax audit part of this doesn't get as much attention, but that's the part that actually Blanche didn't really get into the details of whether that was or was not going to happen. But it sounds like in the private conversations, he said, you know, we'll be willing to do away with it. But let me just play. I think we have what Cassidy said happened last night when they thought that they were making some progress, and then something changed.
Todd Blanche cannot give commitments that Cornyn and Tillis want. And by the way, I'm very concerned about the weaponization of the Justice Department.
If the vote happened today, would you support him?
I'm not going to answer that because I'm still in the information gathering stage.
I thought we were pretty close to landing the plane last night, but this morning there's been some more complications. I think if this were just between me and Todd Blanche, we would have worked this out, but apparently he's getting some pushback from higher ups at the White House. We made a counter proposal, and we thought we basically had met in the middle, but heard this morning that that was all off.
It's the president. It's the president who does not want to move forward with this.
I mean, it's the president doing what he does often, which is prioritizing Donald Trump. I don't think there's anybody who's seen this president act in a way over the past 10 years since he came down that golden escalator at Trump Tower, who's done anything in an interest that was other than himself and his family. This should be a simple look. The American public doesn't want this weaponization bill. A very small percentage, other than the people who were actually indicted, charged, convicted of rioting, insurrection, all those other things, outside of the people who are in the Trump orbit, nobody wants this. I mean, it's a giveaway to people who assaulted police officers, point blank, period. There's no excuse. There's nothing you can do to circumvent that. Now, on the IRS settlement, the reason that Todd Blanche can't really work around it is he's the one who drafted the settlement. He's the one who signed off on these different elements that are going into it. So backing off that is very difficult for him. And the president himself knows that, going forward, there will be accountability. There will be accountability for Donald Trump, his children, and the people who have been profiteering off their service in the White House. You can guarantee that.
Well, to be clear, Trump and the family right now, at least as it relates to the IRS, they're the victims. They were the victims here. They illegally released their tax documents. And I understand why the president comes from the position, or his family's coming from the position, that they want to make sure that they can do everything that they can that legally they can get away with. In the future, they're not going to be subject to another IRS or a rogue, agent within the IRS who will go ahead and target them again. I understand that position. That is separate, I think, from the weaponization fund, which I generally agree with you. It's not a Jan 6 weaponization fund, but it is written in a way that was too broad. And I do think that was a mistake from this White House. But also, keep in mind, you've got two senators here who are holding this entire thing hostage while also acknowledging they don't have a problem with Todd Blanche, that this is not Blanche holding anything up. And yet they're the ones who are holding him up to become the next attorney general.
Yeah, but the other issue, the president is petty. So this is kind of like the state of what politics are, and especially in the Republican Party. So for them to try to, or for any Republican to criticize this, or anybody, period, as retaliation, well, we see a lot of that in our American political structure. The other part I'll say about this that is utterly kind of disturbing on a macro level is that to a lot of people, much like you said, Bakari, this weaponization fund is a slap in the face to a lot of people, especially to those who serve and protect us. Then you have, in general, just the blatant corruption of Donald Trump and his entire family. And you could say that this is to protect him in case somebody decides somewhere down the line, we're going to go after Donald Trump because of some level of personal retaliation. But we know it's not about that. It's about,
what was it about to release illegally his tax
Listen,
documents?
I'm not disagreeing that wasn't illegal. I'm not saying that should have stood.
I'm just saying he's the victim.
But if you're thinking that this is just about
become a victim again in the
him
future,
wanting to protect himself from further things, it's not. It's protecting himself from the blatant corruption that he actively involves himself in, him and his family, all the time.
This is about more than just the release of the tax returns. Because what if I give you, as we're sitting here arguing in front of national TV, I'll give you the fact that anybody who released his tax returns illegally should be held to account. But we're talking about profiteering off meme coins that you rug pulled your supporters off of. We're talking about selling Bibles. We're talking about selling sneakers. We're talking about making sure that your sons or whomever else are on boards that actually get defense contracts.
This is not new, though, right? I mean, the idea that he's selling things
but, I mean,
is not new.
This is very new.
The problem
for the president, for Trump? I'm saying from the presidency.
But are you suggesting that that's legitimate?
Selling shoes? Yeah, of course it's legitimate. He's selling a product.
You're
He's selling a product
suggesting
that
it's
he's putting his
legitimate
name
for him
on.
to be
That-
profiting
that's
off the
literally-
presidency while he's the
He's
president.
profiting off of his
Or the
name.
trade. What about the
his
trades?
brand.
What about the
He's not
trade?
doing
What
that.
about the- what-
That's
so
what-
how about this?
So I agree on the meme coin stuff. I agree
But
with
not
you
even
on
the
that.
meme coins. What you have a president of the United States, and I'm actually turning the page on what I believe to be the greed and corruption. So now I'm on page 4 or 5 here. But what about the fact that he's made thousands of trades while he's in the White House talking about those same companies that then the stock spikes? I mean, he's literally using the Resolute desk.
He's also traded, or on his behalf, he's not personally trading them. I get your point, but he was also talking down certain companies that he was also purchasing. I mean, that was in a CNN report a couple weeks ago. So I think it's across the board.
He's made more money than he lost.
I honestly think there's a reason why Republicans are so scared of this, Jason, and I don't think it's petty at all. There's a fruit of the poison tree problem. This whole weaponization fund emerged from an effort Donald Trump sued his own government. His own government declined to contest the lawsuit. He sought $10 billion in restitution. I'm not willing to say nobody deserves restitution from the Biden era. The Biden era the administration paid out plenty of settlements. But that was so egregious that it was not going to make its way through the courts. And then they appealed to what is functionally a gimmick, the $1776 billion fund. I mean, it's all very gimmicky, and there's a reason why Republicans in Congress are afraid of the corruption charges, because if Democrats take these chambers, one or both, it's all going to be about corruption.
Then I do think they should be more clear about that, because they're not. They're talking in code, and even Cassidy's comments were a little bit in conflict with what Cornyn and Tillis were saying.
But this is also...
let me just, I mean, you suggested that they're talking in code, but just remember that earlier in this year, Republican senators were very clear about this. Here's what several of the other Republican senators have said about the weaponization fund.
This is beyond the pale. This is not good for my colleagues. There's no one positive thing that could be spun out of this between now and November.
I do not support the weaponization fund as it has been described.
I support what Senator Tillis is trying to do to make sure that the weaponization fund is not just mostly dead, that it's truly dead, if you follow the illusion.
I also think part of the problem is that Trump overstates, or he has a great belief in his political power right now, even though he's actually in an incredibly weak position. And he thinks he can just, to put it, as John Cornyn said, steamroll him on this, but he clearly cannot.
Well, I think that's why he's facing much more pushback in his own party, because they also are looking at midterms. They're looking at how these things that he wants them to do and to support, they're very tough sells to the American people. The American people aren't stupid. They see this corruption blatantly happening. They're looking at their own bills pile up, and they're seeing the president profited by like billions of dollars to enrich his personal empire. And that is going to be a tough sell. And also the measure of accountability. You're allegedly the party of law and order, but yet every time we turn around, you're trying to create new pathways for Donald Trump to avoid accountability. People can see this, and that is why they understand we can't sell this. No matter how much you want it, we cannot sell this to people. It doesn't work.
And what to Jamil's point on the macro level, we are literally 100 days out from seeing the ramifications thereof, because this is going to be played out in Ohio. This is going to be played out in North Carolina. This is going to be played out in Iowa. Not necessarily sold on Iowa or Texas. However, this is going to be played out in these places around the country. John Ossoff, I gave him a new first name. John Ossoff's up 13 points right now in Georgia. It's going to be played out in these places. The problem Republicans have, again, is where I began, which is Donald Trump doesn't really care about any of that. Donald Trump cares about himself. And there are probably advisors around him that are watching these polls. I know Susie Wiles is. I know Jason Miller. They are pulling their hair out right now, simply saying that we have to get off of this, because now everyone who's running against these Democrats in these competitive states are going to have to answer questions about you, your family, and the corruption thereof.
All right, next for us, a clear message from voters in a new poll. They are over the current group of lawmakers in Congress. They want a big change. Plus, the White House is considering charging $100,000 for foreign students who graduate and work in the United States. But who would pay that fee? And will the courts even allow it? That's next.